For the plenary talks, very engaging talks. I request the audience members to please be seated so that we may start as soon as possible. The first plenary talk in this session after high tea is by Dr. Shubha Satyendranath from PML, Plymouth Marine Laboratory, UK. She will be delivering the talk on ocean health. But before her talk, I would like to briefly introduce her. Allow me, please. Dr. Shubha Satyendranath is a scientist in the remote sensing group at PML, Plymouth Marine Laboratory. Dr. Satyendranath's research interests include ocean color modeling, spectral characteristics of light penetration underwater, biooptical properties of phytoplankton, modeling the primary production, biogeochemical cycles in the sea, climate change, biological interactions in the marine system, and so much more. Among the very important achievements among the accolades that she has, I would like to mention the recent three. In 2021, she received the A.G. Huntsman Medal for outstanding research achievements in the development of the use of optics and satellites in marine science, as well as a dedication to developing international cooperation and capacity building in oceanography and ocean color remote sensing. In 2022, Dr. Satyendranath was awarded the Knight of the Order of Cultural Merit, the fourth highest order of the Principality of Monaco. The medal is awarded to those who have made a distinctive contribution to science through their work or teaching. And in 2023, Dr. Satyendranath was appointed the MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire in the King's Birthday Honours for his services and contribution to oceanography. It is indeed a pleasure and an honour to have you here with us. I request you to please present the first plenary talk for this session. How much time do you want to keep?
It's 20 minutes, no? So
yeah.
You could give me a warning at 5:15.
Yeah.
Morning all. Can you all hear me at the back? Yes, thank you. When I saw this topic I had been assigned for this presentation, I sort of panicked. I asked myself, what do I know about ocean health? Do I know enough or do I know a lot? And the answer was not enough. So what I'm going to do today then is give a very personal perspective on ocean health and in its relation to human health. So thank you for having me give this talk, and good morning to all the distinguished guests, friends, participants. So, ocean health is a concept that has now entered a broad range of domains, from policy, including the one that we are talking about here, the Ocean Decade, the Sustainable Development Goals, and also in the scientific realm. It is, however, somewhat controversial in the sense that different people read different things into it. But without entering into the details of what constitutes ocean health, if you look at it very broadly and from a distance the way I'm doing, I think you will all agree that our primary concern is to look at what the impact of human activities might be on the oceans, on the ecosystems, and how they might be varying from their pristine state. We want to be able to detect change, if any. It could be an abrupt change, or it could be a slow and steady change over a long time. And unlike human health, where we have a common standard for everyone, in ocean health, our standard has to be with reference to that particular location. We can't have a common reference. So that means that it has to be regionally and locally adjusted, the way we assess health. Because of their fundamental role in the marine ecosystems and beyond, I think we'd all agree that there should be a component of our observing system that is devoted to plankton in general, phytoplankton, bacteria, and all those related microbial community. We can't observe everything, we can't monitor them for everywhere all the time. So we have to select certain indicators that we would like to monitor over a long period of time. If that is the case, then we would want to ask what might be the ideal characteristics of such indicators. So we could list some, such as that they should be easy to understand by everyone, should not be something too exotic or esoteric. It should be quantifiable, unambiguously and everywhere all the time. It should be measurable rapidly and easily at low cost. And we should be able to repeat the observations as frequently as required and do this for a long time. And it should be measurable at a variety of scales. If you consider all these requirements, then I think you would see that satellite observations or remote sensing meets many of these requirements from an operational point of view. And some of the key components of the marine ecosystem that you would like to observe are amenable to remote sensing. For example, phytoplankton biomass or primary production, and many physical and chemical environmental properties that are relevant for the marine ecosystems are also accessible to remote sensing at compatible time and space scales. So we do want to construct time scales, and seasonal dynamics are relevant, and we have to be able to look at interannual variations. So I'm not expecting you to look at this list, but I just want to put it up to show that there are many indicators of ecosystem health from the status of the ecosystem or its function that you can infer directly or indirectly from satellite observations. But there has been one particular difficulty that we had to face if you take a remote sensing perspective into examining ocean health. And that is arises from the fact that individual satellite sensors have a finite lifetime, typically of order 10 years. So if we are talking about climate scale relevant changes, one satellite is not sufficient. Then you come into the problem of having to stitch together multiple satellites with multiple characteristics to develop a long time scale. And there is considerable effort going into that these days. For example, in the Ocean Color Climate Change Initiative of the European Space Agency, multiple sensors are being brought in to strengthen the time scale and also to avoid, minimize gaps in the data from individual sensors, and do this in a way that doesn't introduce artifacts in the time series. At the moment, some 6 satellite sensors are contributing to this time series, and it's about 24, 25 years long, and additional sensors are being considered for the future. For example, PACE from NASA will potentially be included. We might also consider the Indian sensor, OCM3, since we are in the Indian Ocean context. Because we are talking about Indian Ocean in particular, I couldn't resist looking at the ocean color products that are now being generated, this merged product that extends over some more than 2 decades, to see what we can learn about the Indian Ocean from these, from these data. Show you some preliminary results where we have looked at the phenology of phytoplankton. Phenology referring to the seasonal dynamics of phytoplankton over an annual time scale. So we have done this globally, and I'd just like to focus on some results from the Indian Ocean region. For example, if you look at the magnitude of the peak in chlorophyll in any given year, and look at the trend, you see that the northern Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea in particular, is showing pronounced changes. What appears in the analysis, preliminary as it is a coastal effect where the there is a decrease in the chlorophyll very close to the shore, and the maximum seems to be displaced offshore. If this is confirmed after further analysis, it begs the question of what the implications might be, for example, for fisheries. We also looked at whether the satellites can tell us something about whether the basic physiological ecological system is changing, simply by looking at the realized rate of growth of chlorophyll biomass as a specific rate over time. So what we see here in this plot, I don't know if I can point, this one shows all the trends, all the linear trends. And we see that in the Arabian Sea, there is a negative trend, indicating again, provisionally, that phytoplankton are growing less fast. The ecosystem as a whole, you might say, the net effect is the growth rate is slightly less. If you now only look at the trends that are statistically significant, that disappears. So in other words, it's not yet statistically significant. So, but the question arises whether these preliminary results give us an indication of areas that are potentially vulnerable and therefore should go on a health watch. And Arabian Sea would be on my list if we did that. But if you come closer to the shore, that is when I think the intersection between ocean health and human health becomes more prominent. It's not exclusively so, but it is more so. And I think we can all accept that life depends on water. And I have some examples here from Kerala, from Vembanad Lake, that we have been studying for some time. And I think those who know the area will agree that this is a very watery lifestyle. We depend on the water for everything: food, transport, culture, religion. Everything is tied to water. So, in general, we can say if we depend on water, how does water determine human health? There are beneficial effects of relating yourselves to water, to the beach, to the ocean. And this might include health benefits of the environment. It might include high-quality food from the sea. But there are negative effects too. For example, these are just a couple of examples: harmful algal blooms or infectious diseases that come from water. So our goal, when we talk about observing ocean health, must be to maximize the beneficial effects and see what we can do to minimize the negative effects. Now, just by looking at the internet, I came across this list of surprising health benefits from going to the beach. Some of them, you might say, are just benefits from being active, but some are particular to the oceans: the ocean air, the ocean smell, the ocean feel, the feel of sand beneath your feet. They're all supposed to be beneficial to your health. So if you are going to the beach for recreation or for health, you will want to know water quality. And that is something that we should be able to provide, monitor, improve, enhance. And again, you can use satellites at multiple scales to look at water quality from multiple points of view. These are optical and physical points of view in this list here. Because, after all, your eye can tell you a lot about the quality of water. Satellites that use ocean color are actually looking at what the eye sees, but in a more technical way. And if you know the color of the water, or if you know the clarity of the water, you know a lot about water quality. In fact, there was a German scientist in 1937, I think. He said, "Tell me the color of the water, and I can tell you everything about it." Maybe not everything, but you can tell a lot. But there are times when water turns angry. And then, instead of giving life, it takes life away. And this is an example again from Kerala, from the 2018 floods. I think most of the figures are from there. And it caused tremendous devastation. Hundreds of people died, over a million people, I'm told, were displaced. So what can you do in this kind of context? A partial solution might be to make sure that we provide the right information to the right agencies to make sure that they have information about where the floods are. Satellites can contribute to that. Then you can provide such information routinely, regularly, and on an uninterrupted basis. I understand that INCOIS was providing this kind of information at that time. So when these kind of calamities occur, the impact on the local community is very high. A part of this study area that I'm talking about is called Kuttanad. It is below sea level, and traditionally people have cultivated rice there. It is their livelihood. But now, it's not just that one flood, but the increased frequency of floods, the saltwater incursion, and similar relentless assault on their livelihood, their lifestyle, from water-related disasters are defeating these people. And according to this newspaper article, some 15% of the people of Kuttanad have abandoned their low-lying lands for higher land. It's an entire lifestyle, culture that is being affected. So I go to meetings where we talk about climate refugees as something of a problem for the future. But it's not. It's happening now, and people are giving up now. If you look at this man in his little boat in Kuttanad, time is running out for him. So I repeat the message of urgency that we heard from the speakers this morning. We need to act now, and we need to act soon. But this man, I speak about him because I know of him. I've come from that area. But he's not alone. If you look at this review paper that talked about water-related disasters in recent years, it is a global problem. Nobody is spared. And the number of people affected are in the hundreds of millions. The entire world is affected, but if you look at the map, the Indian Ocean region, India, China, the highly populated countries are most affected. So again, I repeat the urgency to react. But the problem is not just the physical damage that arises from floods, death, loss of property, loss of economic income. There is often a long-term continued effect after the disasters that are related to human health. According to this review again, waterborne diseases and mental health are high up on the list. So waterborne diseases are also something that people believe are on the increase, and that the regional distribution of these diseases are changing because of climate. And we need to do something about that. I don't have time to go too much into the details, but I just want to give you one example here that shows that if you're interested, for example, in the cholera disease and the Vibrio cholerae bacteria that are responsible for the disease, then there have been a lot of literature appearing over the last 2-3 decades that show that satellites can be used to predict the environmental distribution of these bacteria from space. So I don't know how fast or how slow I have been talking, but I do come to my concluding points here. So what I gave today was a very rapid overview of where I think the ocean health problem lies and why we need to act collectively and urgently to address the problem. Addressing the problem requires that we observe the oceans at multiple timescales, systematically and continuously over a long time scale. Whereas climate and climate variability might emerge as the most important concern for the open oceans, other factors emerge as being more important when you come to the coastal areas. And these include pollution, natural disasters, and what have I got here? I can't even read what I would put in. Yeah, all these factors become more important closer to the shore. I talked about remote sensing because that's what I know a little bit about, but it doesn't mean that remote sensing has all the solutions. It can be a component to the solution, but integration with other types of observations and with models is absolutely essential if we are to find a long-lasting and effective solution. But integration, I would submit, has to go beyond the ocean community. For example, if we are concerned about human health and its relationship to the environment, then we have to go beyond the oceans and talk to the health community. For example, the World Health Organization also has their goals. We will do this by 2025, next year, and we'll do this by, or we must do this by 2030. Considerable eradication of, not quite eradication, I think the considerable decrease in cholera and malaria are in their goals. And we are far away from them. And according to WHO, the entire solution for environmentally sensitive diseases, the solution doesn't lie only with the medical profession. They need help from all the other sciences, including environmental scientists, to find a solution. So we are in the right place to do that, but that's just one of the many things that calls for a very broad integration. And I thank you. Are you taking questions?
Sorry?
Are you taking questions?
We could ask,
Who's chairing?
yeah, Dr. Ravichandran, sir. Are we taking questions, sir?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very engaging talk. Next, we have the second plenary speaker for this session is Dr. Nadia Pinardi from the Decade Collaborative Center for Coastal Resilience. Her talk will deal with community resilience. Dr. Pinardi holds a PhD in applied physics from Harvard University, and she's a full-time professor of oceanography at Bologna University. Her interests range from ocean numerical modeling and predictions to data assimilation, numerical modeling of the marine, physical, biological interactions, and pollutants at sea. She has written thousands of papers, hundreds of papers in many peer-reviewed journals and on a wide range of subjects. Among the most notable accolades that we can attribute to her, in 2017, she received the Fridtjof Nansen Medal for Oceanography from EGU. In 2008, she received the UNESCO IOC Roger Revel Medal. In 2015, she received the Italian Republic Honors for her scientific contribution in strategic fields for sustainable development, such as oceanography and climatology. And in 2017, she received the Laurea Honoris Causa for operational oceanography at the University of Liège, Belgium. Recently, in the recent decade, she's moved on to assume very important roles in international advisory committees. I request Dr. Pinardi to please present her talk. Will this be here? Is this supposed to be here?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm honored to be finally in India. I had many students and colleagues in these years working far and near me, but I never came to this wonderful country. Thank you. And thank you also for organizing this conference, which is so important, that has the meaning of getting more input on these very essential issues that we need in our community to finally solve. And my view of the ocean decade is really thinking about how oceanography, after so much development, is finally meeting the people and the needs for sustainable development. Okay, let's see. This? Yes. So I've been recently, in the past 5 or 6 years, interested in putting what I know to the service of the coasts. And because it is where that connection is stronger, as we have also seen from the previous talk. And in particular, UNESCO solicited me to look at coastal resilience. That was an interesting thing that they asked me to do, because I never thought it was so complicated, coastal resilience. And so we start with the well-known disaster risk reduction definition, where we have this capacity of the coastal community to come back to some functionality after a perturbation has occurred. And we have many elements. You see here in a nice drawing that is part of the collaboration with the DCC Indian Ocean. So we have many pieces that we can put together and even make them in a loop. But fundamentally, we still have to understand how to use this concept in an important way. And as Vladimir was saying, maybe for enhancing our capacity of managing the changes. So here we have the decade outcomes. My personal thoughts in the recent year is that coastal resilience is a system attribute that is a multiple facet indicator, and it has not been used enough to strengthen science-based environmental management. So we have to undertake that. Hopefully my center will, or our center will do that. Furthermore, I have been reading a lot about this and the relationship between adaptive capacity, which is a concept that comes out from climate change community, and coastal resilience is not yet clarified, is not. In fact, some people, much more authorized than me to say something, say that coastal resilience is one aspect of adaptive capacity in the coast, clearly. So then, the third point is that almost no operational tools stem out yet from coastal resilience, for coastal resilient planning. So we see some, and certainly satellite are a very basic and very fundamental step, but I think at the end of the decade, we will have more. Okay, so the center that I have the privilege to direct now has the mission to try to solve some of these conceptual and practical problems, strengthening the co-design, the connection between the new science and technology that is developed in the programs, in the projects of the decade, and the local community stakeholders, coastal stakeholders. So we are a small center with an operational setting with a pretty large program committee, and we are funded by the local government. This is another thing that I think is important, that in this process of building toward science-based coastal management for coastal resilience, these kind of governance systems could be developed. They're very fruitful. You are in contact with the local policymakers, and then you can offer debate on solutions. So this is a local government, the Emilia-Romagna government, that finances this center, which has to coordinate internationally. Okay, so we have also a large group of programs, and the 4 in dark blue are the main affiliated programs that look at coastal resilience from a technological and scientific point of view, and you see them mentioned. Then we have a wealth of other programs and projects that are affiliated and that we should try to contact to get input for our co-design. This is the function of the DCC. So we have also drafted in the past year some strategic objectives. Naturally, you would expect to have the part which is improve in science information for all, meaning making it available in a new format, in new forms that are accessible and usable, both. And then we have an enhancement of stakeholder engagement as a main driving aim in our center. We have educational targets, which are part of the solution. And then environmental justice is also something that we want to uphold and sustain and enforce in all our previous activities. Okay. So here is a very important activity, I think, that we started with the DCC Indian Ocean region, and which is coming now to maturity. We want to, in this stakeholder engagement, we want to use the UNESCO Ocean Decade to make us aware of the situation. What is the situation in coastal management and risk reduction and preparation of climate adaptation planning now in the world ocean coastal areas? And so we have drafted together. Here you see some typical questions, and please be tuned with our center because you could, I like to ask you all to come in and give your opinion. And also, if possible, get your stakeholders, local community stakeholders from civil community to contribute. Okay, so one of the other activities, as I said, just to tell you the idea, and it will be launched at the end of this year, you find also information in our website, is to address the problem of the private-public connections. This is a very important part for sustainability. And so we called our course, newly developed course, so that will be held at the end of the year, Resilience, Coastal Business, Sustainability, Growth, and Human Capital. And it is dedicated to coastal consulting companies, coastal managers and operators, and civil protection, for example. Then it's a small course, which we hope after we do the first and we get some feedback from the students, develop in a continuous way. And, it will be a mixed and hybrid way that allows people that work to follow the course. So 1 month at home and possibly 1 week in presence, with a lot of material on the web. So autumn 2024. Then we have cross-cutting activities. And here, instead of giving you the list, I want to give you one of the most important one, that is what the UN Decade launched, that is the cities with the ocean. This is a very important initiative. Oceanography has had many stakeholders in the past, especially open ocean stakeholders, the navies, the transport, the fisheries. Now we are going to have finally the coastal stakeholders, and among these, the cities, which are where the population concentrate, and they have enormous problems coming from the ocean. As you know, many cities don't even know. Many cities that are on the ocean don't even know about the ocean. And most of, I'm in touch with a lot of cities, and the problem is in their schools, they don't even tell the kids they are on the ocean. So we are starting from really bottom up, but now we have a starting network which was organized by the DCU, and I see a big hole in the Indian Ocean, so we should probably get out from, there is a way to get other town involved. There is a call for action now, that if you contact me, I can tell you the details. And then the Barcelona conference will open it to a larger community. Yeah, so this is a very important initiative. And to contribute to this, the DCC organized in 2 weeks from now at Ocean Sciences a meeting, a start dialogue of coastal cities with on community resilience. As I said, this is only not one part, and actually we already have extracted how community resilience, what of community resilience is important for urban development. And hopefully here we will have a debate that will start to dig into this issue, what the urban development needs and what the science can give or will give in the future. So this is session at Ocean Sciences. If you're there, I know it's very expensive to go to Ocean Sciences. So this is not the right place to discuss this very important issue, but hopefully in the future we will have other meetings concentrating on this. And then this is also, among the different actions that the DCC on coastal resilience has is to support its affiliated programs and projects. And here is one that is dear to my heart because I also chair that program. It's called Coast Predict. And we launched last year the Global Coast Initiative. Pilot sites from 29 regions, which we classify as regions, and a lot of institutions involved, not only scientific institutions. And this is the more clear map here. So we hope, and this shows that you need a network of real coastal managers and scientists, which does really not exist. We have a very important example that is the tsunami program, because they have specialized, but we need multi-hazard. And so hopefully we will do together with Tsunami and these other and these other places and more, hopefully, we will reopen the call for more in, I guess, a year or two. We'll try first to implement in some of these areas. So, yeah, we already know, they tell us what is their problem. So it is the multi-hazard real-time forecasting. It is the support for adaptation plans to climate change with downscaling to reach the required resolution, and the processes, include the processes, and so on. So we already have, from all these areas, what is the problem that is important, okay? So how do we solve this? We are trying to plan for a global solution, but maintaining the coastal community specificity. And that means that we have to use the most recent technology to do this. So we need to find a computing platform, cloud computing platform that allows people to have tools that are shared between coastal communities. Fragmentation is one of the issues in the coast. And so we think that we should have, is unfortunately invisible here, but we should have this cloud computing platform receiving the data and then developing the service on the cloud. Okay. So now concluding, I should go back. Yeah. So the last activity that we have undertaken, the very important activity, because clarified our ideas with Srinivas and a working group of about 20 scientists and experts. We have drafted the white paper, which we will discuss in these days. And so I hope really you can think about how to give input to what we think, because this white paper will shape our outcome in coastal resilience at the end of the decade. We have thought to address two major outcomes. The first one is to have a multi-hazard early warning system, which does not exist at the moment, and adaptation planning criteria or design criteria that can be generalized to all or most of our areas. And here is the two things you can look at. You can take a photo to join us. We have a newsletter, and we have a pretty good, hopefully, full of information website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Our next speaker for today's session is Dr. Kilaparthi Ramakrishna. He will be delivering his talk on climate and oceans. Dr. Kilaparthi Ramakrishna joined the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution on October 2021 as a senior advisor to the President and Director on Ocean and Climate Policy. While he continues to hold this position, he was given additional charge of Director of the Marine Policy Center with effect from November 1st, 2022. Prior to this, he had also extensively worked with the United Nations as Head of Strategic Planning at Green Climate Fund, Head of the UNESCAP ENIA office covering 6 member states and also 2 associate member states, as Chief of Cross-Sectoral Environmental Issues and Principal Policy Advisor to the Executive Director of UNEP. He is an elected life member of the US Council on Foreign Relations. He is also the chair of Strategic Advisory Group of the Nippon Foundation, JEPCO Seabed 2030 project, member of the Advisory Board of Black to Blue, a global initiative of economist impact, and a member of Board of Directors of the Woodwell Climate Research Center. Dr. Ramakrishna holds BSc and BL degrees in Sciences and Law, Masters and PhD degrees in International Law. I request Dr. Kilaparthi Ramakrishna to please deliver his talk on climate and oceans.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and I want to begin by thanking Dr. Srinivas Kumar and Dr. Ravichandran, Government of India, for this kind invitation. I'm pleased to be here for more than one. I mean, normally it is customary to say when you're invited that you're most grateful, you think this is a really big deal and all those things. But in my case, it is a big deal, and I'll tell you why. I was introduced very generously with all the things that I have done. I thought I've done reasonably okay, but my family was never impressed. What are you doing in America? Come back to India, do this and that. But then when I was working for UNEP, we had the opportunity to name Sachin Tendulkar as a goodwill ambassador. So then they thought, oh, that's fine. So now you're doing something important. But now that I'm actually invited to come back to Hyderabad, they said, well, then you're really doing well. So I'm personally grateful to you for that invitation. But more seriously, I think what we are trying to do here is really quite significant, and the preparations that led us to this conference and the meticulous detail that Dr. Srinivas Kumar and his colleagues had given to this conference is really quite extraordinary. And if all of the various regions in the world are preparing the way this conference has prepared for the Ocean Decade Conference in Barcelona, I think we are really going to have a stellar conference, and I'm confident of that. The one thing that I wanted to, at the very outset, say is that the 10 themes that we have identified for the Barcelona conference and the papers that are circulated, I thought originally that I would speak on the theme that is allocated for this particular talk. But then I discovered, listening to Vladimir Ryabinin, that he covered that ground rather well. So I want to take a slightly different tack. But before I do that, I want to first of all say that this conference, coming as it does after India's presidency of the G20, and that very powerful statement that was annexed to the summit declaration, and the work that has gone on in preparing the state visit of Prime Minister Modi to United States. In all these exercises, ocean has played a big part of it, and I want to commend in particular Dr. Ravichandran for his leadership on that. And our institution got involved in these preparations in more ways than one, and I and our institution is really looking forward to strengthening that relationship and then continuing to make things happen as we move forward on these things. And one concrete result that we had was to have INCOIS as a partner institution of the Ocean Pavilion that Hui and Scripps together have launched in the Climate COPs. And so that's the, in the nature of introduction, that's what I wanted to begin by saying that. The second thing I want to say is, I want to go back to what Vladimir had begun saying, and I particularly liked his the kind of the way he described it about how the ocean is sick and different doctors are working on different problems, but then the doctors are not talking to each other. And I think that really captures the, where we are, with oceans. It is, we call it a green planet. We should probably call it a blue planet, given the fact that 71% of the planet is ocean. But more importantly, even in terms, this talk is about climate, so I want to focus largely on climate. And when you think about that, the Climate Convention, which recognizes, going back to 1992, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, that ocean plays a very powerful role in capturing anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases. to the tune of almost the same level as the land-based systems do, about 25%, give or take a percentage point here and there. And yet, that convention did not factor in the role that ocean plays in climate solutions until recently. And I want to talk about, walk you through that process and then how we are gaining ground. I mean, I don't want to give the story that the SDG 14, dealing with oceans, is the least funded of all the other sustainable development goals. True. Are that climate is not factoring in oceans, or ocean agreements that are coming up are not factoring in climate impacts on them, including the most recent agreement on biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions, or the High Seas Treaty, as it is called, and so on and so forth. So there is an element of that, but I do want to emphasize more on the positive side of it, and the progress that we made with G20 Summit in India is a very big example of how we are connecting ocean to climate solutions. And the most recent conference of the parties in Dubai is another example. But if you were to walk through this, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change did acknowledge the role that oceans play as a sink. But that's it. We just left it as is. We didn't want to touch it because we know so little about it. Without us doing anything, it is continuing to take that much carbon, so let it continue doing that. We'll just let it be, kind of thing. Whereas when it came to ocean, the land, we recognize that, forests are sequestering carbon, but we're cutting down forests, so therefore we need to have systems in place to encourage afforestation, discourage deforestation, and provide incentives to keep the forest intact, and so on and so forth. But we don't do anything like that with oceans because we don't have good enough sense of what it is that can be done and how do you factor that, and so on. So though 1992 agreement acknowledged the role that oceans play, it did not do anything in terms of factoring that in, nor any of the decisions that the parties have taken in the entire period from then on until the Paris Agreement. But when it came to Paris Agreement in 2015, there was more acknowledgement of that, and then the civil society groups have also come together and then said, we need to talk more about these issues. But that happened, in fact, from 2009, the Copenhagen Summit. But then it was in the green zone, and folks will come together and then for one day have lots of events focused on oceans and trying to connect to climate, but then that's about it. But after 2015, the Ocean Climate Platform came together, and there is more conversation about in the negotiations, and particularly because John Kerry was Secretary of State in the United States at the time, and he was very committed to ocean health and what he can do, what United States government can do. And then he started this Our Ocean Conference series, which is now going to take place in Greece this year. And so the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, at the end of that Paris Agreement, came to the conclusion that there should be a special report on oceans and cryosphere. And then that report had led the governments attending the Madrid conference to think about a dialogue. Because of COVID and whatnot, that dialogue ended up being a virtual dialogue. And by the time we came to Glasgow Climate Summit, a formal decision was taken to have a formal dialogue on ocean and climate. It's called Ocean Climate Change Dialogue. And the very first such dialogue took place in Bonn in the subsidiary bodies meetings in June 2022. And I was asked to moderate, facilitate, whatever is the term, of conversations between member countries in the UNFCCC Secretariat. So when I did that, I discovered that it's not just that the decisions had not factored the role of the oceans in the climate solutions. I mean, in part, that did not happen because the member countries knew so little about the link between the two. So we had a series of presentations, Sue Binias from United States government, and then from somebody from the International Maritime Organization, and all these people came together and made excellent presentations. But then the member countries that were represented in that session were all kind of scratching their head to say, okay, there is a possibility that we can do something with it, meaning thereby how we can include them in the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, and developing baselines. So the conversation in that dialogue was largely about how little they know on what to do. And so I was very pleased when Dr. Srinivas Kumar talked about working with POGO and then bringing young people to work on these issues. That's absolutely vital. I know that, and Jamie and I work closely with Nippon Foundation, and they also have a similar training program, to carry that issue forward. And that's more on the seabed mapping and so on. So we need to increase that, not just as a part of an education, but as part of capacity development to government officials, so they can really utilize the system well. So Glasgow Summit, and then we came to Sharm el-Sheikh, and by the time we came to Sharm el-Sheikh, the dialogue, the parties have decided, I think they particularly did not like the way I conducted this, the dialogue. They decided that the dialogue should be moderated by a representative of the government. So they have elected 2 representatives, and then so they I mean, that's actually the right thing to do. The government should take ownership of it, and then they have done that, and so that happened. So we gaining on that, so once that was done, the attention of not only governments and people like us said, well, dialogues take you only so far. It's just information exchange. It's about saying what we know and what we don't know, what we need to know. But the time is of essence, and then we need to really move forward with it. And the conclusion is that the global stocktake, a decision that was adopted in Dubai after intense discussions and where the negotiations had to be extended by a full day, was on global stocktake and also global goal-on adaptation. In both those instances, ocean played a big part of it, and then there are concrete decisions that came out as a result of that. So I tend to see these things as positive developments and something that we need to build on. But again, I go back to what Vladimir had said. We need to really put a stop to this siloed approach. While these, I not only looked at the fifth, topic 5, but I looked at all the 10 of them very quickly. And one of the things that I hope that this conference will do is really dive deep into it to figure out what exactly the kind of linkages that are missing and what we need to do across the board. And I particularly liked the approach where you try to combine 3 topics and 2 topics, so at least, the one that we are talking about, 1, 3, and 5, it's marine pollution, biodiversity, and climate. So there are really lots of linkages that we can build on, and then, when we have these panel discussions, we can continue doing that. So I just want to conclude with what was accomplished in Dubai, and what the future holds in terms of really connecting ocean to climate solutions. First and foremost, they have agreed on modalities for addressing the need for ocean protection and restoration. Again, this is a first for the climate conference. And the reason I'm talking about climate is because I spent a lot of my adult life working on climate issues, but that is not the only reason. if you look at these conferences, conventions, that have the conference of the parties, the attention paid by member countries to these conventions varies by a lot. When you talk about climate, you have, in any given conference, you have 100 heads of state and government. When you talk about others, it will be like 1 or 2. I mean, that's just an indication. So if you really want to make major progress, doing this with climate has a lot of impact on other agreements as well. They also agreed on counting blue carbon among concrete mitigation and adaptation actions, starting with NDCs. How do you develop the baseline and what you need to do moving forward? I already mentioned that both in the global stocktake and the global goal on adaptation, the building of resilience and supporting island states and addressing chemical pollution in the ocean was a big part of it. And lastly, just I think 2 weeks ago, IPCC finished its meeting, taking stock of decisions adopted in Dubai, and then they came to a series of conclusions, and one conclusion is that we need an expert meeting on carbon dioxide removal technologies, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and provide methodology report on these by the end of 2027. Why is that important? Well, that tells us really, not only in terms of what the baseline is or ought to be, and also what sorts of actions could be allowed or permitted in terms of gaining some time. If you want to keep the temperature increase to 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius, you need to take large amounts of carbon, from the atmosphere and move forward with it. Funding, I talked about how this was very much, one that requires more funding. And at the Ocean Pavilion, we had Bloomberg Philanthropies come and then announce $350 million for ocean funding. Now that's not enough, but at least that's a great start. I believe Bezos Earth Fund is trying to come up with one. By the end of this year, we will hear about that. So these are all important developments, and we need to build on that. So clearly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we have, I think, made an excellent start. And what this conference is trying to do is a great way to not only bring what India has done, but bring what the Indian Ocean countries and all those countries that are interested in the Indian Ocean together. I mean, the number of attendees and the number of countries that are represented here is a great indicator of all that, and I am really pleased that we are on the right track to move forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir. Our next speaker for this session is Dr. Peter M. Haugen. He will be delivering his talk on policy and ocean governance. Dr. Peter Mosby Haugen is Policy Director at the Norwegian Institute of Marine Research and Professor of Oceanography at the Geophysical Institute, University of Bergen, Norway. He serves as lead expert of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, Ocean Panel, during 2015 to 2019. He was the elected chair of the IOC, UNESCO IOC, and from 2018, he became co-chair of the expert group of the Ocean Panel. His professional interests and academic career spans from coastal and polar oceanography through ocean climate processes, carbon cycling, and ocean-based climate solutions, including offshore wind. During 2019 to 2022, he was responsible for the IMR Global Development Program, and 2021 to 2022, he was part-time on loan from IMR to the ocean team at the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He has been engaged and is keenly interested in ocean science policy society interactions on topics ranging from blue forests to the role of aquatic food in the food system. I invite Dr. Peter M. Haugen to please deliver his plenary talk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for this, and thank you all for being here. This is a wonderful event to be part of. I really will talk about the global issues, but I would like to start by saying that as a Norwegian scientist, it's an extra pleasure to be here. After 2019, when our Prime Minister visited India, we have developed more and more collaboration. And my colleague Eric Olsen from IMR is also here and speak tomorrow. It started back in the 60s with the International Indian Ocean Expedition, actually, and some work from that time, but it has been going on. in waves, and now it's quite expanding. I'm really happy to be linked to this by coming here. Okay, my given talk is about policy and governments. No, I'm not really a policymaker. I'm also not an expert on law or governance. So I'm could have maybe tried to speak about the international treaties. We heard about the climate COP. Now we have the biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, where major progress has been made. The World Trade Organization has made progress on fisheries. We have the Convention on Biological Diversity with quite specific goals for 2030 now. All of these instruments are there, but I'm not going to talk about that. I thought I would rather talk about how can we link ocean science to policy in the best possible way in the context of the decade, and see if we can just share some thoughts and ideas there. And I'm more of a practitioner in this than any sort of expert on how that is going to happen. So just to remind you, we've heard about the decade outcomes. I would like to say that maybe when we started planning the decade, we said the ocean we need for the future we want. And everybody started to say after a while, of course you cannot do that by science. You cannot reach that. It's more of an impact we'd like to see, but we have to work through outcomes. Then we describe the outcomes. And now we have the challenges which relate to the goals, the kind of outputs that we can deliver. But when we talk about science and policy, we have to link the two domains. And a policy initiative that I've been involved in, as also has been mentioned, is this high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. And there are linkages starting to be explored already a couple of years ago. What we see when we look at the ocean from a policymaker's perspective is perhaps different than what we see from a scientist's perspective. The ocean panel, which is this combination of countries, came up with 5 pillars that they see that we need to have in order to create a sustainable ocean economy. Ocean knowledge and ocean health are perhaps things that we think of and that are addressed. But also ocean finance and ocean equity are quite important here to get this right and to share. So just quickly, these are now 18 countries which go together, which have a shared agenda. And we've tried to produce knowledge support to the development of that policy. I think it's a little bit unbalanced with respect to Western countries these days. It was expanded to create a larger coverage of economic zones and coasts. And then the biggest countries were actually over there. But it's working not to be a bigger, very, very much bigger, but maybe should be a little bit bigger in order to cover regions. The latest edition is actually the Seychelles. But so trying to respond to the questions of these policymakers when they want to create a common agenda, we solicited input from a number of experts on issues from food to climate and many other things that were put together. And it's been quite an interesting journey to be on for me to learn that how important, for example, ocean finance is in order to make a change, and how that can be looked upon in order to help that. One recent one that I take as an example here is we produced a report in September for how much ocean-based climate solution can contribute to closing the emission gap in 2050, or we have also 2030, in order to get down to the 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, also in the report. And the various ocean economy sectors, what can they do if we do the right things with them? And you see them here, conservation and restoration, which is really about coasts to a large extent. Can make a significant contribution. Ocean-based renewable energy is offshore wind largely, but also with other ocean renewable energies by 2050. Transport, which is worked on in green shipping. We also looked at tourism, actually, which is a very small pillar here. It's a small sector, but it's one which is increasing rapidly, and which also some of the cruise industry has quite a significant footprint in terms of the number of passengers and where they are going. Ocean-based food, fisheries and aquaculture, making it more climate friendly, and also looking at the feed and how this is putting together. And then offshore oil and gas, why is that in here? Well, this is actually about phasing down offshore oil and gas, and that's something that has to be done. It cannot be there into the infinite future as part of the sustainable ocean economy. And then possibly carbon capture storage. So the main message, about 1/3 of the required solutions for closing the emission gap, you can find them in the ocean. Now this is it doesn't happen by itself, even if we identify it, but it's a very positive message. And I think that's also something we should look for solutions, we should look for positive messages, how the ocean can help, not only, as Vladimir was saying, describing how bad the state is, but we should look at how we can help. So I want to also one diagram here to maybe the ocean looks different from a policymaker than from a science perspective. This shows in terms of the annual revenues, the gross, the jobs in these various sectors, and the value added. And you see the sectors along the horizontal axis, and starting with oil and gas again. And to the very right is tourism. We have to break the scale there. Tourism is so big. Tourism is about 50% of several of these, 50% of the gross value added, 50% of the revenues, 34% of the jobs. Only fisheries is bigger. And then we have some of the aspects which are maybe more research intensive, renewable, genetic and mining, are very small. Now, it's not unnatural that research is bigger on some of the emerging than the established ones. But I think when policymakers try to make us move into a sustainable ocean, they have to look at human activities in the ocean. How can we regulate? How can we make policy for it? And then we have to also think about sectors like tourism, where actually, in fact, tourists are looking for a clean ocean. Tourists are looking for attractive ocean. And there are ways in which to make solutions that can also benefit other sectors like food production if we work with those sectors as well. What we are seeing when looking into the future is a strong growth in ocean economy sectors. We see competition for space. We see a need to go together in integrated management, which is also what Vladimir was talking about. This is just going to increase. I think maybe in this region, the Indian Ocean is the most populated ocean basin in the world, and I think there's a lot to learn from solutions also from the Indian Ocean that can be brought to other parts of the world, but integrated approach. So what is this sustainable ocean planning that we talk about? It's a policy tool for policymakers in different sectors to go together in a country or between countries and make sure that the policy is expressed in a way and developed in a way which is inclusive, because we need to have the sectors involved to actually do what is needed, not only to be told what to do. And it has to be a key message from the Ocean Panel. It has to be endorsed at the highest political level. It has to be resourced, and you can only do that if you go to the highest political level in each country and probably also in the international world. So this is a policy tool. Marine spatial planning is a technical tool, and these things are quite connected, but we need to connect them in order to make change. So examples, you can have these various sectors working together in different ways, in different regions. And I'm not going to spend time on this. I realize we are moving towards lunch break, so maybe I shouldn't spend too much time. But there are ways in which we need to make these together in order to have a successful outcome. And as somebody else was saying, we don't only need to look at the ocean, we need to look beyond ocean, and I take here aquatic food systems as an example of that. We have to not only fish the fish, we don't have to not only produce it in aquaculture, we have to have the value chain of feed to aquaculture, but not least where the food is going into human consumption. That all that is in a sustainable way. So it is complex. It's not only the ocean we need to look at. So trying to think a little about what is the best strategy to make success. How can we become better in serving policy and making the policies the right ones? One thing that I would like to commend UNESCO actually for is commissioning an evaluation of the strategic positioning of IOC a couple of years ago. This is from 2021. And talking about the decade as part of this, that is quite a useful frame for making strategic positioning. We need to have a strategic direction, which I guess is the main thing we are talking about for the decade right now, and I'll get to that. And then institutional and individual strategies, that's something else, but these need to be linked. At IMR, we just produced a strategy for the next 4 years. The title of it is Knowledge for the Ocean of the Future. Titles may not say so much, but this is looking into the future. It is not saying exactly what sectors we are in, but the whole ocean of the future. But strategic direction, that's the main thing, you know. And one thing that I've been thinking more and more about is the need to match the societal demand for science with the supply of science, and do that in the best possible way. I think as scientists, we typically think in the way that we do explore opportunities in science. Then we produce some plans together with the government, and then we look for people in private or whatever to finance them and go on. Now we are beginning to talk in the EU and elsewhere much about more mission-oriented science. But in particular for the policy level, you know, the tool to move ahead is to plan, set societal goals, then begin to experiment, and then you actually create a demand for knowledge to sustainably implement that. And that is the area where I think science and ocean science we can do much better than we have been doing. Exploring these ecosystem interactions between the government, the action, which is also the private sector, and the science, which is the broad definition of science that we actually have in the Ocean Decade, which I encourage everybody to look at. It's not only the traditional science. So we can create some positive feedback loops there if we are able to respond to the requirements from the policy level. And don't forget, you know, the theory of change here is we produce output from the science that feeds into the outcomes, like the societal outcomes of the decade, and then we really hope to achieve the impact, which is where we started when we talked about the decade as the ocean we need for the future we want. So it's the future we want, essentially. Okay, so that's this one again to remind us of how we got there. Then how can we move forward? And here I would like to recognize fellow colleagues who joined me in a workshop, actually, sailing workshop on the sailing vessel down there last year, when we talked about how can we move towards the United Nations Ocean Conference in 2025, and in particular, as I guess Vladimir mentioned, there is a science congress taking part just before that. I think we need science that's well communicated, focus on solutions, I mentioned that, and also to make sure that we get the population involved, like making more attention to the ocean in the competition for attention. Including, of course, all regions, and as we also point out in several papers, includes indigenous and local knowledge. And respond to policy needs. It is not about, you know, either doing your science in a good way or sort of responding to out there and caring about how the science is used. If the science is used in a good way, that creates demand for more science. It's not either or, it's both of them that feed on each other. And include the private sector, and of course, we need to develop these services like database services, which are easy to access to not only experts but to others, and capacity development. So we can give science support to policy development. That is what I think about when I say planning, and we can see with science support to implementation of policies, which is management. So Happy to see that the IOC is consulting with all 150 member states now on this new strategy for this and how we can move that forward into the future. I think this is a core way of putting these things together and making sure that we stay relevant and go in the right direction. So there is ideas for sustainable ocean planning in the UN Ocean Decade. And that will be something that will be discussed in the coming months and year, and in Barcelona and so on, how to proceed with this. I'm really happy to be with you on this, and I'm really happy to be able to discuss this further with you on the coming days. Thank you for hosting this, and it's just such a perfect occasion to lead to Barcelona, to be here, to be in the most populous ocean basin of the world, the most populous country of the world, and a very important area for bridging and developing ideas so that we can bring them back to the global scene afterwards. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir. I now request our director, sir, to please, for some concluding remarks, and also he wants to make some announcements. I request him on stage.
Thank you, Trishnita. I just wanted to make a couple of, first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers for these keynote talks. Actually, they were wonderful, actually. All of us benefited a lot. Very high level, very to the point, and then where we need to go from here on. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to take questions, but the speakers are here. Please, so take time to talk to them during the lunch, during the tea breaks, and so on. And of course, also during the sessions. So I just wanted to make a couple of quick announcements. So after this session, we'll be breaking out into parallel sessions, which are actually organized as teams. So please look at your, the program sheets that you have. So we'll break now, and then we get back to this hall as a plenary, again only on day 3. That's on February 3rd at 2 p.m. So until that time, from now on, until day after tomorrow afternoon, we'll be, in individual parallel sessions. And then the sessions, where the sessions are being held and in which room, it is on your program sheet. You must be having hard copies, but otherwise you can talk to any of the organizers having an yellow badge. The other thing is actually there is a DCC IOR at INCOIS, and then we have a governing body meeting. About 8 members of this governing body are here, and then some of them are joining online. So we have a meeting of the governing body. Somebody will take you there to that. The governing body members can please follow us. Maybe you can follow me. We'll be there. The meeting starts at 1:30 now. So we have very less time to, grab a quick bite and then go into the meeting. And the other thing is actually we'll arrange a visit to INCOIS facilities at 5 p.m. today. That is after you finish your parallel sessions. So whoever is interested, some of you have visited yesterday, but then whoever is interested in coming, seeing the INCOIS facilities, which I would highly recommend you should, please meet us at the reception at 5 p.m. We'll make it quick, about an hour or so. But then if you have further, if you like some areas or things that you need to discuss with scientists, the next 2 days will be, that will be an opportunity. So that's the reason we want to do it today. So 5 p.m. at the reception. And of course, on day 3, starting from 4 p.m., so let me come to, day 3, 2 to 4 p.m. What are we going to do here as a plenary? So when we break out to the individual sessions, like for example, today we have challenge 1, 3, and 5, that, like Rama was mentioning. So they'll be meeting in parallel sessions, but on day 3, they will come together. So there are 3 chairs for these sessions, these 3 parallel sessions. You will run your individual sessions, the chairs. So what we would expect is on the last day when we are coming into the plenary, one chair can actually compile the findings from these 3 sessions. So you could decide amongst the chairs which of you would do that. But I think you'll find that, you'll make the decision easily. So we had a meeting of the co-chairs yesterday, but then since several of you were traveling, we could not actually convey these instructions. So I thought I'll do it now before we break out. So the chairs can kind of decide, one of you can put together. Of course, the rapporteurs will be there to help you actually to put together things. And then one of you can present on the last day actually. So that will be 3 chairs presenting for all the 10 challenges. And then after that, that session is over from 2 to 3:30. So that will be the, we'll have all the messaging that we need to take to Barcelona at the end of that 3:30. Then we break for tea, and then at 4, starting from 4 to late into the evening, we'll have the inquiry, a cultural program and a dinner. So I would like to request all of you to, join that. I'll warmly welcome you personally to join that event as well. So these are the announcements I wanted to make. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Over to you, Trishnita, if something.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to the speakers for their very insightful talk. Thank you to the audience members for being so cooperative and patient. Thank you to the entire organizing team for putting up this amazing production. We now break for lunch. I don't want to take any more of your time because there is, of course, a hurry. I request the dignitaries accompanied by our director, sir, to please proceed towards lunch, ground floor.